Experience holiday cheer at Tanger Outlets with savings up to 70% off your favorite brands. From fragrances to accessories and the latest styles, discover the best gifts for everyone on your list. Save big at Nike Factory Store, Michael Kors, Under Armour, Coach, Polo Ralph Lauren, Kate Spade New York, and so many more. Unwrap the best at Tanger Outlets. Hundreds of brands, endless gifting options. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Northland Sports Page. It's Brian Prudhomme. It's Dave Cook. It is Saturday. We let the good times roll at least until noon. Happy to be with you on another Saturday. Dave Cook, good morning. Happy to be with you as you continue to do minor surgery on your microphone because it wants to hang somewhat to my right.
Yeah,
which out of context sounds very interesting.
It's not interested in me talking at all, I guess.
No, and you know what? There are probably listeners that feel that way about both of us, so not a big deal at all.
We can probably list them.
Absolutely. If we can list all of our listeners, we're in big trouble. But one thing we can list, let's do it off the top today.
All right.
Is our great sponsors here on the Northland Sports Page.
Absolutely. Let's start with the OG, the OG, Arola Architecture Studio, Hoops Brewing, ABS Auto Solutions, Stewart Spike Sports and Trophies, Comfort Systems of Duluth, Advantage Emblem and Screen Printing, Kohler Toyota and Kohler Hyundai, Mike Regan at Christensen Group Insurance, Assisted Living Locators. You can reach them at www.assistedlivinglocators.org/Duluth. Krause Heating and Cooling, your carrier, HVAC authorized dealer. Mount Royal Bottle Shop and the Blackwoods Group, including their locations on London Road, up on the hill, Tavern on the Hill, in Two Harbors and in Proctor.
Very well done. Very grateful for our great sponsors. Very grateful to be able to spend some time with you earlier this week. We did a pair of hockey games. And if you add up your PA and your play-by-play or analyst work, you've done a ton of hockey games. Your sinuses and my sinuses tend to sound like that today.
Woof. Yes, my sinuses are saying, hey, you got 2 more hockey games today.
I was going to say, your work is not done. I actually had to double and triple check the calendar because for one weekend, and maybe it's only one weekend out of the next 17 or so, my calendar is empty. I'm good with that because I did public address for 3 basketball games last night, did play-by-play for 2 hockey games the night before, play-by-play for a hockey game back on Tuesday. It's been a week, but I couldn't believe a weekend that was empty for me. So not that you'll have any idea what that's like, but I'll let you know what it's like to try to experience that.
No, but you know, folks don't really know how many games you do.
Right.
I very seldom.
You
have
scratch
more
my
games.
surface. Yeah.
Very seldom. This week, I got you.
You do.
Because I did the same hockey game on Tuesday, the same
hockey games on Thursday,
3 yesterday, and then 2 today.
Yes. You and I will compare schedules again when the new year hits. I think the end of 24
mine
should be.
Mine slows down. It's crazy.
And mine is the exact opposite. The end of 24 for me should be, by our standards, and that's a big asterisk, smooth sailing. 25, I'll see y'all in 26.
Yeah, I've had double headers and triple headers every weekend, since the beginning of the year. So I think my college teams are going to be on the road a little bit more, and so is Marshall. So.
Well, and plus, let's be honest, college kids get a very long break from school.
Yeah.
Sometimes that equates a very long break from playing games, too.
Oh, yes, it does. It does. And I think I see the girls' hockey team again. I saw them last night. I think I see them the first week in January, but I don't think I see the guys until the 3rd week of January.
And again, the oddity, speaking of breaks, it's time for 2 more for Steve Patosha and myself, because speaking of 2 more, the Vikings have at least 2 more games in a slot that we can't bring you a show, because this week they don't play tomorrow. They play Monday night, so no show for us. And then they go to Seattle, which has been a house of horrors in its own right, but that is that 3 o'clock window, no show for us again. As I say no show, that's exactly what I hope the Vikings don't do in both of those games and beyond.
Well, they have to show up on Monday night because they're wearing the ice uniforms.
Yes.
Right? They're going to be there all white.
Does that do anything for you?
I haven't seen them yet. Like, I've seen them in a stand, but I want to see them on the field.
But conceptually, does that do anything for you? Because we've had the color rush fad. We've had the Packers looking like they play in Dockers. We've had this whiteout type stuff. I have seen memes of doing more of a purple theme next year. And I've even seen, because we all know the Boise State blue turf, I've seen pictures of what would US Bank Stadium look like if the turf was purple. I'm actually in for that.
Yeah, no, that'd be kind of cool. No, I'm interested in seeing what they look like Monday. Here's the thing. We're going to see the first play, and then, they're wearing white uniforms, right? So it's not going to be simply, all right,
now that wound was self-inflicted. Dave Cook is a lot like most of us. He talks with his hands. I'm doing it right now. But his hands got a little out of control. and he knocked his already out of control microphone somewhat into submission.
Well,
and it leaned way over where he almost had to change seats to keep talking.
Yeah, no, it moved a good halfway around a circle.
Boy, between you getting a microphone and me getting computers working today, it has been a morning, and we're all of 6 minutes into the show.
I tell you, no, I think it's going to be really cool. We're going to see the first play, and then they're just going to be uniforms, right? Like all of the other ones. I'm sure there's going to be good and bad. The problem is Green Bay did these uniforms like 8 weeks ago. And so the difference is instead of purple and yellow, it was green and yellow, and otherwise they look very similar.
Right.
So, I mean, they're not going to be shockingly new, but it'll be fun.
Well, and let's be honest, this is the NFL's version of doing what everybody else is doing. The NBA has how many city edition uniforms? MLB, alternate uniforms. Hockey, the Wild have tried to be the North Stars. A lot of folks like those uniforms the best. NFL just had to follow suit. There's only so much you can do.
Well, and really, the NFL started all this.
Right.
We talked about it Thursday.
With the color rush. That was crazy.
But
that was somebody at Crayola said, "Here, try this."
Well, and you and I have different ideas on what throwback uniforms look good. The ones that are bad.
Well, it's just you don't like the baby blue, and I love them.
The Giants uniforms are terrible. They look like
New York or San Francisco.
No, the New York Giants look like the Montreal Canadiens.
Okay,
like, it's brutal.
Yeah, no, those were bad.
And we like to laugh at the Green Bay ones with the big spot in the middle of the chest and the Dockers.
Yes,
but like Pittsburgh's uniforms were weird, but I liked them.
The Bumblebee uniforms, yes, you like those?
I did. And
that's like if UWS had a prison. That's what those look like to me.
And the Bears throwbacks, I've always liked those. So I think some of them are pretty cool, and I think some of them aren't. And so I don't mind uniform changes, because if that means a team makes a couple bucks on a really cool uniform or a jersey, cool.
Absolutely. As long as they win games, we'll survive whatever they're wearing.
They should take Jacksonville's keys away, though, with the color rush things. That putrid gold top to bottom was pretty bad.
Yeah, that was different. Jacksonville trying to survive in a different way, just be a formidable franchise in a number of ways. But speaking of surviving, I want to keep moving because
let's move along.
We did survive. Kudos to all of us listeners, too. We did survive another Friday the 13th. You and I were probably too busy to notice, as we mentioned, doing a trio of games and beyond.
Since I
so you had some scary moments.
Nope. Since I had my voice removed way back in 2014 on a Friday the 13th, I'm aware of Friday the 13th.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. All the years I've known you, I've known of the surgical procedure. I've known of the recovery. I've known of the kind of ins and outs of what's become of that operation. I had no idea it was a Friday the 13th.
It was.
Surprised you still went through with it.
Message to everybody. Do not be the last surgery on a Friday on Friday the 13th. Wow. Everybody's tired, right? And I mean, it was something I should have paid attention to.
Now, here's a good sign or indictment on our friendship, because if I was your doctor, first of all, you're screwed. But if I was your doctor, instead of wearing a regular doctor's mask, I would have come in with the Jason mask. Are you ready?
Right. No, and that would have played. Like, that's kind of how it ended up, Brian. So, I mean, I don't like to say that, but that's kind of how it ended up. So, Jason mask would have been just fine.
Well, the
Freddy
good news
Krueger
is
worked.
He's got a voice. He's got one of the more velvet tones voice in the area, so we're going to stick with it for a couple hours at least today.
Yeah, let's do that.
But it's going to be about some survival and about Friday the 13th are a little bit scary. So what we're going to talk about today is historically and currently the opponent for our major sports teams that you fear the most. And when I say opponent, we can go a number of different directions. You can talk about coaches. You can talk about teams. You can talk about players. You can do all of the above. What's going to be fun is currently and historically, because we all have weird ones, because there are great players who dominate. We just get it. Those are going to come up. But there's also the Craig Monroe syndrome that I've brought up how many times on this show.
100%.
Craig Monroe career-wise is nothing. Craig Monroe career-wise, as long as he played the Twins every day, would be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So who scared you is kind of the question.
What sport you want to start
based
with?
on Friday the 13th. You've always been Will Steger for these.
All right, let's start with the NBA, because you brought up a name or a thing that I hadn't thought of, and that's coaches, and that's Pop.
Okay.
Like when Popovich, because he can have a team of just mere mortals, and he comes and plays at Timberwolves and owns them. Like the years that they were bad before they got this guy, the new center, who I'm not even going to try say the name. Victor something.
Victor Wembanyama.
Yes.
I got you.
The 2 years before then, they were bad until they played the Timberwolves.
Right.
Right? So Pop's always spooked me a little bit.
Well, and see, that's the thing, because I didn't think of a coach for the Wolves that scared me. I just knew you might want to go that direction. But I certainly didn't think Popovich, because I'm just going to go a different direction in general and say Greg Popovich was at the top of most coaching lists for a long time. Timberwolves were never good enough to even be scared by him.
That's true. Except if you had any kind of run, if the Timberwolves had won 3 out of 5 or whatever, 3 out of 4, Pop was coming to town and that run was
right.
over.
To me, it was Phil, because it doesn't matter who he's coaching. He had some of the best teams, and you can always have the chicken of the egg argument. Was it Phil that made those teams go? Because I look at the Lakers with Phil and I look at the Lakers with Del Harris, and that's always my example. But Phil Jackson's in the building, you're losing. So I guess if I have to pick a coach, I can go with him. But
and Phil brought Luke Longley back from the dead. So speaking of Friday the 13th, right? So Phil's a good one. If we go to players, like there have been players,
current and historic will be fun.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because Kawhi has owned them, but Kawhi's owned a lot of teams, right? But he's a place to start because when he played the Timberwolves, it was always like we had the guy that was going to be the next, and I would love to see him and Jaden play. I mean, now Kawhi doesn't play hardly at all,
right?
But before then, we would have somebody who we thought this guy can play defense against Kawhi. Guess what?
Right,
no chance.
Well, I'll tell you what, because I just thought of this now, and I wanted to think of it before because it would have been fun, and I'm wondering. Can we go with a player that used to scare the bejesus out of you when he was an opponent and now scares you because he's on your team?
Yeah.
Because the guy that picked the Timberwolves apart, and I think that's part of why he's here, is Julius Randle. But the show prior to us was making great points over and over again that this fit still isn't quite there, and you're scared if it's ever going to be. So can you have a player that currently and historically scares you, but he shifted onto your team?
Yeah, no doubt. And Randle's problem is something we talked about when he played for the Knicks. Boy, the rest of the Knicks stink, but boy, Randle can play. Well, he's brought that to Minnesota with him.
I was going to say, but think about what he did when he played for the Knicks. This is when Julius Randle put up 50 pieces on the Timberwolves, and it was the if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing, and we're not sure that this was the best idea yet.
Yeah, and Ja has owned them when he's played against them as well, and that was always fun because the parents, him and Karl Anthony Towns' parents would always bark back and forth, but man, Ja, before all the shenanigans, and he's coming back a little bit, but before all the shenanigans, Ja was the real deal.
Right. Well, and you mentioned Cat too, because that kind of segues to where I was going to go, because they played against him last night. The Timberwolves did, and they beat him. They beat the Lakers by 10. But Anthony Davis, didn't matter who he was playing for, who was on the Timberwolves, were they good or not, Anthony Davis was, as the kids would say, going to go eat against your team. So I guess currently it's probably still Anthony Davis for me. Could be pick a nugget because the Joker's their best player, but the Timberwolves tend to get beat by everybody else. The Gordons, the Jamal Murrays, they scare me too.
Well, and when they've done really well against the Nuggets over the past couple years, or last year anyway, and this year, but they've given Joker his, but they've been pretty good at beating the rest of the team. Shoot, I had a guy in my head and now it's gone. You said, Zion. When Zion can play, and he doesn't
when he's
play,
available,
he doesn't play very much. But when the Pelicans come to town, that's the first thing you look for is Zion healthy? Because if Zion's healthy, he just kills. They don't have anybody. There's nobody at that size and weight that can guard him. Jaden's their best defender, but Jaden's as big as this bottle that we have in front of us, and Zion is Zion is Micah Parsons. Let's be honest.
When available, yes, that's correct.
When available.
So I think we've covered the Wolves. Where do you want to go next?
Well, we can go to the NHL since that's currently in, and that's the.
Well, and this is the one you've been waiting to flex on because somehow I hope he's happy that he comes up on this radio show on the weekly basis. Historically, it's Bufflin for you, isn't it?
And
I felt like I had to remind you, but
that's not even because I was going current.
Okay.
Bufflin's the guy that beat you so bad that the only way you were ever going to get him to stop beating you was to actually go figure out how to get him, right? And because they played in the same division, man, he just kicked our butts over and over and over every year. Each game they played, intimidated you. It's like Ryan Reeves, except he could play, right? So Bufflin is historically the guy. Kopitar in Los Angeles seems to always play best again.
This year, it's anybody in Los Angeles. If we play them, we're in trouble.
Those Kings teams that were good, man. We'd go out there and Doherty would beat us up, and Kopitar would score 2, and there was a mess.
Yeah, Drew Doughty said, "I'm better than all of you." I feel like as far as division rivals, which is kind of where you started, and again, this guy eats up everybody, so it's not breaking news. But I feel like Nathan McKinnon just said, "You know what? I need some points. I need to get back in the mix. And he always did that if Minnesota came to town or if he came to town to face Minnesota.
Yeah, no, Colorado's a good one. If we want to do teams, Dallas. Dallas just is kind of what you'd like to be, and frankly, we were. But that team comes in and they're so solid, and they're solid at every level. And regardless if the Wild are scoring well or defending well,
things are going
Dallas,
great.
Yeah.
Oh, here comes Dallas. Oh, here comes LA. Here comes Winnipeg on the schedule.
Yep. And so that one is always tough. One, to lose to them, and two, to have to say, yeah, this team's good.
What about historically, because this is kind of the monkey on the back of the Wild, and we always kind of use the Jake Allen example, but it was the Wild making goaltenders that are average to above average suddenly channel Ken Dryden, Patrick Waugh, Dominic Hasek, all of the above. I look at goaltenders like Gibson out in Anaheim. They tend to make him look pretty good sometimes. Jake Allen is the prime example. Pick a goalie. It must be an Anaheim thing because it all started with J.S. Jaguar, but at least he went on to be good just about everywhere.
Well, and they treat new goalies like the Twins treat new pitchers.
Rookie pitchers, yep.
Yeah, they new goalies seem to flummox us pretty good.
Right.
So no, I agree with that. The funny thing is if we were doing this show in Edmonton would say, "Oh my gosh, thank God we beat them 7-1 because the Wild are the team that
say they own us."
Yes, we are the Friday the 13th for
right.
Edmonton, which is kind of weird because Edmonton has done the one thing we can't do, and that's score in bushels. So yeah, no, let's move along. Let's move along to baseball. Speaking,
I was going to say because the last two are probably going to have a number of candidates,
and really for the Twins during my entire life, the biggest bugaboo has been a pitcher they've never seen before.
I was going to say that makes it difficult to pick a name because historically you just want to hear the scouting report. And if the scouting report is he'll make his major league debut or his first start in the division or came out of the bullpen and will make his first start in a new role, the Twins are getting one hit that day.
Yes, they are. They are going to get beat. And I don't have the names in front of me, but if you go on to like any stat platform, you can probably find that out.
Now, there are some pitchers that historically were very, very good that also gave the Twins fits, and some can consider, well, that's low-hanging fruit if they were good against everybody. But there was a solid decade, and it didn't matter if he was in Baltimore or with the Yankees. If Mike Mussina was on the hill, the Twins were losing. It was over.
Well, I'm going to give you a name that's even got less horsepower than that. Mark Burley.
Yes.
Mark Burley.
Yes.
Just, if he was in Chicago or if he was in Toronto throwing 64-mile-an-hour mush balls, they had no chance.
The last game in the Metrodome that I saw with my dad was against the White Sox, and Burley pitched. And the Twins scored 2, and they won the game. You would have thought we won the World Series the way my dad and I celebrated.
Yeah, man, they couldn't touch that guy.
Right.
The other guy they couldn't beat was Boomer Wells. David Wells owned them as well.
Well, and again, think about the memoir that says he threw the perfect game and he may have not have been in the best condition when he did it.
Oh, he says he was hammered.
Right.
Let's be honest.
Right.
But going back even a little bit further, Kansas City had, when they were good, when Saberhagen was there, right?
Yeah.
They had
the 1-2 of Saberhagen and Gubiza.
Gubiza was tough on us, but they had a rookie that came up who killed us, and it's David Cohn. David Cohn used to beat the devil out of us, too, when he was a kid. He had so many pitches from so many different directions that, he owned us as well. That pitching staff was really tough on us as it was.
Well, and if you want to stay with some Royals radio here, I thought you were going to go Dan Quisenberry, because the only type of pitcher that I saw Kirby Puckett struggle against was anybody that threw that submarine style. Kirby couldn't pick it up for some reason.
Yeah, no, but Quisenberry beat a lot of teams.
Yeah.
A lot of teams. What about the Baltimore staff right after their superstars? So you had the Martinez's and those guys that the Twins just Baltimore. So we look at like the Dallas Stars we talked about, and the Wilds just struggle against Dallas.
Yeah, we go fetal position no matter who's on that team.
We forget that Doug DeSensei's team just I remember being a kid in Little Falls and destroying one of my dad's bikes with gray spray paint.
Gray spray paint. There we go.
And once again, him getting really mad, and the Baltimore was playing the Twins, and Belanger came up. Mark Belanger's one of the top 5 defensive shortstops of all time, but he hit like 200. Like the Mendoza line was his chin.
He was the Mark Lemke before Mark Lemke.
He just killed the Twins. And Dad was there yelling at me, and he goes, "Hold on." And he puts his ear out because here comes Belanger, and it was a line drive into right center field to drive in 2. And I got away with the spray paint because he just threw his hands up in the air and walked away.
Nice. Well, I wondered about this because it's still kind of true, but it's certainly historically true as Dave Cook's microphone again continues to take on a life of its own.
It's like Dad is here wanting
I was going to say, after the first break, let me know if you're going to switch because I want to make sure that I have the switch on so people can hear you. But I'm going to go with the general statement. And again, this opening topic, if you're just joining us here on the Northland Sports page, we all survived Friday the 13th yesterday. So we're talking about opponents that strike fear in Minnesota sports fans. And with that general statement, you might say, everybody.
Well, now here's pinstripes coming.
But we're being very specific. See, I'm not even going to go there because...
That's a trope by now.
Right. I don't even think we're qualified to be afraid of them. We are, but at the same time, we're honored to be in the same stratosphere at times. I think that's just true. But I'm going to go with West Coast trips because It didn't matter how good the Angels were or weren't. Oakland, same deal. Seattle, to a certain extent, same deal. And I don't know if it was because as a kid I would get in trouble all the time for having my radio on late and having the game on at 11 o'clock on a school night. But it seemed like not only would I take that sacrifice, but the Twins would find a way to get beat out west in a heartbreaker. You know, you mentioned, I think you brought up the Senseis earlier.
Yep.
I think of him as an angel. I think of Brian Downing killing this team whenever possible. You know, Jared Weaver threw a no-hitter against the Twins as an angel.
Well, Brunansky as a rookie. You know, when the year before they got him, the Rod Carew. I mean, Lyman Bostock was there. If he would have played against the Twins, he'd have killed us. My team about that though is Toronto. Like in the late 70s, when they were just starting to get better, they've owned us since.
Well, I remember in '91 when the Twins did beat them to go to the World Series and of course eventually win it. I remember in '87. Not necessarily fearing the Tigers. Now, mind you, I was 8. Maybe I didn't know what I should be fearing. But with that Toronto matchup, I thought, you know, this lineup doesn't quit. You've got Joe Carter. You've got Kelly Gruber. You've got Devon White. You've got all these players, you know. I mean, a decorated lineup, let's be honest, because there's a reason they won the 2 World Series after that, by the way.
But go earlier, and they had Jesse Barfield and George Bell. And
George Bell was amazing, by the way. Lloyd Mosby was an interesting player, but he had a good career against the Twins.
And our first baseman with the hard hat that we always
John Olerud.
Yes, that we always compare
Joe Mauer
to.
Yep.
They've really over time just owned us. But you're right, that's the Scott Erickson toughed out in the ALCS against that Toronto team. That's the game that really got us there.
Absolutely. So this topic started with me bringing up Craig Monroe because there are guys that just, for whatever reason, didn't do much elsewhere, but when they played the Twins, their A game showed up. I think the same of a former Twin like Jim Eisenreich.
Yeah.
I liked Jim Eisenreich. I didn't like him when he was playing against us because something good always happened.
Yeah, and that again, Royals, right?
Yeah.
That Royals team has always been a bit of a bugaboo for us. But one of the guys who came to mind when we were talking about this, do you remember the Detroit Tiger pitcher who killed us and then came here and blew his arm, just destroyed his arm on the first pitch?
Joel Zumaya.
That's the one.
Yes.
Zumaya owned us when he could throw.
As you're doing your Kathleen Turner impression, I'll let you clear your throat a little bit, like the club song in the early 2000s goes, better? Let me clear my throat.
Yeah, that's a little better.
But let's go to currently because he's a very good player, MVP caliber player, so he's going to beat anybody up. But I cringe every time Jose Ramirez is batting against the Twins.
Yeah, he owns them, and him and Rafael Devers. Those two guys kind of they came up at the same time. They're one of those players that can play 3 different positions really well and rake, and they both own us. But that doggone Cleveland Indians pitching staff for the last 10 years.
Guardians.
Yes. Guardians with Bieber and the one Clevenger and those Carrasco.
Well, don't forget about the beanpole, Tristan McKenzie.
Yeah,
he owns the Twins as well.
That whole pitching staff has owned us. There's been times the Twins have been the better. Well, a lot of times, frankly, the Twins are the better team, but they got no chance against Bieber, Clevenger, and Carlos Carrasco.
All right, so we will talk more baseball with Lavelle E. Neal III in about 4 minutes. Let's dedicate those 4 minutes to Viking fear, if you will, which, again, anybody just tuning in is going, what are they talking about? Who do we fear? Everybody. The biggest fear we have is fear itself because the Minnesota Vikings' scariest thing sometimes is when are they going to Viking? But historically, who scared you, even if they were good or not?
Brett Favre.
Really?
Yep. Brett Favre scared me because he always figured out a way. You know, it was, pull something out of his backside, as my dad would say. And what do you know? We're down late and we're scratching our head because We had no business being down to him, but he just, all of a sudden, you look down and it was 367.
Right.
Three touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but the interceptions were before halftime, and away we went.
See, now I didn't go that direction because I think it would have been easy to go with number 4 or number 12, as Packer fans refer to their players by number. Because
Did Rodgers
Favre
do that for
and
you, though?
Rodgers scared you plenty. I think Rodgers was scarier because he didn't make the stupid turnover hardly ever until this year because he's with the Jets, but I digress. But Favre and Rodgers, they scared me, but I'm not going to go that direction because we did beat them enough. And Favre is going to give you a couple opportunities to beat them. We all know that. And at the same time, Packer fans already know that team lives rent-free in my head. But part of it is because of those fans. You could be having the best day of your life, and it would be like if somebody came up to me and said, yeah, but you still walk really slow. Yeah, but you're still losing your hair. Yeah, but you're still overweight. Because it doesn't matter how good the Vikings are doing. The Packers will just chirp at you about their Super Bowl trophy case, and that just ends.
Can I give you a name, though?
Sure.
Jamarca Finley, the tight end. Man alive.
Jermichael Finley?
Yeah.
Okay.
He
would say you gave me a name that combined with Jamarca Sanford, but go ahead.
That guy, man, he had one good year, really. But against the Vikings, he would show up so randomly and go, 3 for 85 and a touchdown.
Well, and Packer tight ends did that. Bubba Franks did that. Mark Chmura did that. Mark Chmura scares people for a different reason, but I digress entirely. But I went away from the Packers because it's too easy. It was the rent-free idea. Now, I still went with a Hall of Famer and an iconic football player, but I went with this guy because his teams were often bad. Yet the Vikings were going to find a way to lose to him at least once a year because he was that good. And there were times where he didn't even have good games against the Vikings, but when he did, he had great ones. It was Barry Sanders for me.
Yeah, and when the other side of that is his wide receiver, Herman Moore, at the same time, if the Vikings sold out to stop Sanders, Herman Moore was one of the first 6'4"
It was Herman
guys.
Moore, it was Brett Perriman, it was whoever
and it was
the Lions
Scott Mitchell,
had.
who you didn't think anything about.
Right.
And then all
it was
of a
Dan
sudden,
Marino's backup.
He's throwing daggers to Herman Moore because we've had one of those 20 carries, 85-yard games from Barry Sanders instead of 165, and Herman Moore's got 110 and 2.
Well, and what it really should have been, if we thought about this, it should have been Mike Allstott because the Bucs had good teams and the Bucs had a good attack with Dunn and Allstott, and we all know it. But Mike Allstott looked like he could have had Vikings. 30 carries a game as long as we against Minnesota.
Yep, owned the Vikings.
Yeah.
And Stafford is the other Detroit quarterback, and he seemed to save great games for the Vikings.
Well, is he part of your guy now? Because they have 2 losses this season. One of them is to his team, and it was before they were any good.
It's the eye roll now. It's like, yep, sure, here he comes again.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess that's correct.
All right, so my current guy we haven't played yet this year, but I fear the way the playoffs are shaking out, regardless of round, they're going to have to at some point. The opponent that strikes fear in me for the Vikings, because I just think matchup-wise it's horrible, is Jalen Hurts.
Yeah?
Because he doesn't throw a ton. And I would argue he doesn't necessarily throw it well. But he's so mobile. They've got the ultimate short yardage, elixir that nobody can stop, no matter how much Julianne at St. Scholastica hates when I say these words. Tush push is a thing, and it's an effective thing. I just think Jalen Hurts, and we've proven it over the years when we've had to go to Philly, can pick his poison against us. And if and when this Viking season ends, I just got a hunch he's going to have a hand in it.
Well, and here's the other guy. I thought you were going to pick Seattle, and I was going to say, no, Brian.
It's just that stadium. Because
Russ isn't there anymore. And then when you said we haven't played him yet, I'm like, is Brian bringing us to the Super Bowl against Pittsburgh? Because Russ cooks against us.
No, because when I think of Seattle, it doesn't matter who's on the team. It's just in that city, in that stadium. Because the last time that I remember the Vikings winning in Seattle, I want to say that Chester Taylor ran a 90-plus yard touchdown, and Seneca Wallace might have been the quarterback.
Yeah, that's fact. It's interesting, though, because if you look at it the other way, what team has owned and what team have we owned? Man, it's kind of Dallas. The one thing the Vikings have been good at is competing with and beating Dallas over time, even though every time we beat them, it's
sort
sweet.
Of, because I would think of Cooper Rush getting his name on the map thanks to us as well. So there's been up and down moments, certainly. I think in general, I'm trying to tell myself not to be afraid of success because this will come up later, but the Vikings are 11-2, and we still talk like that other shoe is on the verge of dropping, and we're still talking about will we or won't we with Sam Darnold next year. Do me a favor, enjoy this year. Enjoy the next hour and a half. Lavelle E. Neal is next. We're the Northland Sports Page. Stick around. We are back on the Northland Sports Page. That intro music can only mean one thing. It's time for Lavelle E. Neal III. Star Tribune columnist, got a chance to speak with him yesterday and book him on very short notice. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, we are the Northland Sports Page. Dave, the best thing about that It didn't even cost me $765 million to do it.
Yeah, well, Juan claimed as much money as he wanted to, so thank goodness for Lavelle.
Absolutely. Juan Soto to the Mets for a boatload of money. I want to start with that because we'll talk about a lot of monetary issues or lack of issues if you are Juan Soto. But let's bring in Lavelle E. Neal III. Lavelle, did your eyes pop as hard as mine when you saw that dollar amount? And good morning.
Yeah, well, they were starting to pop before that because once they found out that the bidding was headed, it was going up in increments of $50 million. It seemed like every offer. Once it got past $600 million, I was like, oh, my God, it's going to pass Shohei Ohtani. And sure enough, it did. And the crazy thing is that, Scott Boras has figured out a way to add a new clause that can make his client more money because he has opt-outs in that deal, but the Mets can buy out the opt-out for $4 million each year. So he has a chance of making $805 million over the course of the contract. So Scott Boras is 72 years old, but he keeps coming up with inventive, creative ways to maximize the potential profit of these contracts. But it was definitely shocking and eye-opening. It reminded me it was about 24 years ago of when A-Rod signed that $252 million deal with the Rangers, and I was covering the Twins at the winter meetings when that one happened, and that sent shockwaves across the league. In back-to-back years, we've had $700 million players, going for $700 million, which means we are headed to a $1 billion contract. It could happen here in the next couple of years, gentlemen. Some superstar guy is going to be headed to free agency at a relatively young age, and someone, probably Steve Cohen, is going to pony up that much money. That's crazy to think.
That is crazy to think about. You're going to have contracts that are similar in value to franchises, if you will. You talked about Scott Boras with the opt-outs, and don't you think we need to have those? Because you mentioned Scott Boras is 72 years old. When you're signing guys to 15-year contracts, it feels like you're going to have them as part of your organization when they're 72 years old.
Yeah, you're right. And the influence they wield, because owners get involved when these elite contracts are being discussed, and it's almost like the player becomes a member of the board of directors in those situations. And now Juan Soto, has cachet and he has clout and he has status, on the Mets here. So it is crazy. And I don't think baseball has to come up with a hard cap to solve some of its problems, but this is just an example of what happens when you don't keep owners. You don't protect owners from themselves, because someone is just going to get out there and blow everybody away. He's going to treat the team like, you find a couple situations where he's going to treat the team like a toy, or the guy is just so uber competitive that he's going to stop at nothing to put a winner on the field. And when you sign for $765 million, that, helps everybody else behind that player. Watch, Corbin Burns is going to sign for about $250 million. Vlad Guerrero Jr. is going to be a free agent next year. He'll probably find a deal in the $300 million range, maybe $400 million. And when someone breaks that barrier and sets a new standard, it allows everybody else to fall in line behind them, and just the rising tide lifts all boats. And you're going to see that happening here over the next couple of years.
It was interesting, Lavelle. I was talking to a baseball coach here locally, and he made a really good point. And he thought he was going to sign with the Yankees, and he said two things. One, it's easy to be comfortable where you're at when the numbers match. And two, he said, listen, guys at this money, they're really not making decisions on money anymore. They're making decisions on who treats my family best. What kind of extra stuff can I get? Am I comfortable with this team? What's the food like on the road trip? Stuff like that. And so it always felt like the Yankees had an advantage. Boy, the Mets must have laid out all kinds of other fringe benefits. Well,
here's the thing: the Yankees have a policy. They've never paid for a player's suite on the road. Jeter had to pay for his suites. Aaron Judge is paying for his suites. And, Steve Cohen of the Mets heard about that and said, what? I'll give him a suite. No problem about that. And I think the Mets also threw in a family suite at, what's their stadium called? I can't remember right now.
Citi Field.
Yeah, Citi Field. Yeah, apparently Soto's going to get a suite for his family for home games at Citi Field as well. So, this has been going on for years. I remember way back in the day, I don't know if you guys are that old as I am, but I remember Kevin Brown, he was like one of the first athletes to get a clause in his contract that the team had to pay for his family to jet from their home in Texas to California, I think when Brown was with the Dodgers or something like that. And it just goes from there to there. And there's agents like Scott Boras that find or encourage teams to add sweeteners to deals that sets new precedents. So now the family suite at the ballpark is now one of the new sweeteners.
Speaking of sweeteners and speaking of family, how sweet is it going to be if this family that is involved in the Phoenix Suns gets some involvement in the Minnesota Twins? Because that broke about 2 minutes after I talked to you yesterday.
Yeah, it was weird because Thursday night, I was with some people who I have no business being around because they're all wealthy and I'm not. And one guy was telling me, I hear that there's a Midwestern family who's very wealthy who's interested in buying the Twins. And I woke up Friday morning trying to figure out, well, who could that possibly be? And then that Bloomberg story broke with I hope it's Ishbia. I'm not sure how you pronounce the name. I think it's Ishbia.
I was going to say, I've heard 3 broadcasters try it now. You, Cine, and you, Cine, and Common. And Common doesn't know, but I've heard 3 different pronunciations, so we'll go with whatever buys it, I guess.
Yeah, and so, of course, the brothers are worth a combined $15 billion. One owns Matt owns the Phoenix Suns, and Justin, his brother, is a minority owner, and that would switch. In this situation, Justin would be the owner, and Matt would be the minority owner. So they're from Michigan. They're big donors to Michigan State.
That's who I thought he was going to say they owned.
Their business is headquartered in Chicago. So, and Justin is a big baseball fan. So I just want to caution everyone, too, that this is still relatively early in the process. And I was told earlier this week that there's a lot of interest in the Twins. There's a bunch of interested parties, and there's a bunch of parties still kicking the tires. But there's several hoops to be jumped through before a transaction is complete. I wouldn't start, getting ready to celebrate a regime change just yet because, one, and this is a big thing, they have not seen the books yet. Okay?
Right.
They haven't opened up the books and see the situation that the Poets are in and go, this is a little tougher than I thought. Now, the Twins have a lot going for them. It's a good roster. It's a strong roster. I argued with people on Twitter yesterday about this. X, that when they're healthy, it's actually a quality roster that can win the division. 2, they have a modern stadium, and the Twins are signed to a long-term lease. 3, there's no other market to move the Twins to that would be a bigger market. So worrying about them moving the team shouldn't even be in the thought process at this point because they would be moving to a smaller market, and who wants to do that, especially when you have a lease agreement and a nice stadium. 4, the one pimple on all this is that the TV deal's wrecked.
Right.
We don't know how much they're going to make this year from their situation with having their broadcast handled up by MLB. And it looks like baseball won't get out of this mess with the local television broadcast until 2028, when about 2/3 of the team's deals will have expired, and the league will then bundle all those teams and auction them off to the highest bidder for broadcasting/streaming rights. And that's when they think they're going to put the genie back in the bottle and share more of their local television revenue. I believe they only share about 48% right now, and that number needs to go up severely. When you have teams that are getting $330 million a year from a television deal like the Dodgers, and teams like the Twins getting 50, that's just too much of a disparity that needs to be addressed. And I think more owners have come to the realization that it's for the greater good of the game. But other than the TV package, the Twins are a very attractive team. But once again, the prospective buyers won't know for sure how much they want the team until they get a chance to look at the books.
No doubt about that. I think that's the best point as we're chatting with Lavelle E, Neal III, Star Tribune columnist, Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook. And Dave, I kind of compare it to my holiday shopping this week because I'm a little bit on the lazy side and I like convenience, so I do a lot of my shopping online. And you look at things online and, man, that picture on the website looks great. And you get it and you go, this is not what I bought. So you kind of wonder with, I'm interested in the Twins, great stadium, good roster. Seems like the fan base for the most part would be interested. And then you look at the books. Go ahead.
And I thought Lavelle was going to say the way college football is now, he kind of does own another franchise. He owns a football team at Michigan State. But, we went a different direction after that.
Buyout.
So earlier, Lavelle, Brian and I were talking about Friday the 13th this weekend and players that scare you. And, Brian, we missed one because Kevin Brown was one of those guys. If you faced Kevin Brown, you knew it was an L. But, Lavelle, the question we threw around to start with is the greatest fear for the Twins historically when it comes to pitching, whichever rookie or first-time starter that the other team is bringing up? It seems historically the Twins have no chance.
Left-handed, definitely. The left-hander they never faced before seems to always do very well against them. So I would agree with that, especially from the left-handed side. We've seen that time and time again. The Twins' ability to figure out the unknown lefty of the softball, I think it's been one of the types of pitchers that have tormented them through the years, or at least since I've been here. Definitely was the case last season when their right-handed hitters were all broken down and they couldn't find a way to it was easy to neutralize that lineup.
No question about that. And again, the basis of the topic was because we survived Friday the 13th, we were talking about, what scares you. But the individual player in baseball that brings it up for me all the time is Craig Monroe, because Craig Monroe played for the Twins for about 5 minutes. But when he played against the Twins, he looked like a Hall of Famer. So we tried the can't beat him, join him theory. Speaking of joining the Twins, is anybody going to do that this offseason? Because we talked about the ownership question. This feels like a lame duck offseason because they're not spending at all.
No, and actually they would like to shed a few $1 million off the payroll as well if they could, get down to about $130 million. And so it's going to be tough for them to augment the roster, which is weird. It's unfortunate, but they're taking a beating with the TV deal. And once again, I don't know what the revenue stream is like. I don't know what their costs are. Are they holding tightly to baseball's mantra that you can't spend more than 50% of your revenue? What does that mean? But it's unless they move some bodies and make a couple trades here, I don't see how they're going to be able to bring in new talent. They want to trade Chris Paddock. They want to trade Vasquez. I don't see how in the heck there could be that much of a market for Vasquez at all. A backup making $10 million, they're probably going to eat at least half of that salary, and then they're going to need a backup catcher because I think the only catcher they have on the 40-man is Jair Camargo, and you're going to need a third wheel, just in case something happens to one of the first two. And Paddock, I don't know how much trade value he has, but there's teams so desperate for pitching, and the Twins are actually they're not in a bad spot from a rotation standpoint because Joe Ryan's on pace to return on time for the season. You got Bailey Ober, Pablo Lopez, Simeon Woods Richardson, who pitched better than everybody anticipated. And then you got David Festa, you got Zebby Matthews, you got a couple other kids coming up the pike here. Andrew Morris is a guy who a lot of teams are trying to trade for at the deadline. Apparently, he is an impressive looking starting pitching prospect. And then you got David Festa, who's in the not David Festa, Marco Rea, who's getting close as well. Yeah. So from a starting standpoint, they've got bodies, so they can afford to trade someone like Paddock. I just know if you trade them, you're just pretty much handing them over for probably a double-A player or someone out the 40-man at this point. And would that be enough to satisfy their needs as far as payroll? I'm not sure. But, yeah, I would not expect anyone of note joining the Twins this offseason. Maybe if they sign a decent first baseman because they do have a spot there. But then again, I would like to see Julian and Miranda get another crack at major league pitching over the course of a year. They see how much better they've gotten at the plate. So it's unfortunate. You're not going to make any moves. They're going to make people run to the box office and start buying tickets. what you see is what you have right now. This current roster may be it going into spring training.
I was going to say, we're going to test the theory that if they are healthy, it's good enough to compete. Speaking of rushing to the box office, I don't know how you're going to do it because they raised the prices anyway. My home opener tickets are $30 more a piece than they were a year ago, despite what we saw in September from this team. But speaking of September, the Twins went bad, and that's when football season started. The NFC North was really, really fun from top to bottom, but all of a sudden, then there's your team at the bottom. But with the Vikings, it's always scary when we play a lesser opponent. What in the world are we going to see from the new look, at least coaching-wise, Chicago Bears on Monday?
Well, if their last game in San Francisco is any evidence, then it's going to be pretty ugly for Chicago.
You didn't like 8 yards in the first half? That wasn't enough?
It was 4, by the way.
I gave you double the credit. I love you, Lavelle.
The thing is that for as terrible of a game manager Matt Eberflus was, he was actually a good defensive coordinator. And what we saw from Eric Washington, the replacement coordinator, last week was very troubling. Kyle Shanahan had a field day messing with the Bears linebackers with all kinds of motion and Deebo Samuel running in the backfield and drawing their attention and then getting things open in the middle of the field to Kittle. It was just troubling to see that if you're a Bears fan. And so I don't know what mental state this team is in. You know, they've been through so much this year with all the late losses and the bad game management at the end and injuries. DeAndre, I'm waiting for the injury report to come out this afternoon. DeAndre Swift may not play Monday. So they're going to be down to Travis Homer as the lead running back with Darrington Evans coming off the practice squad as a backup, and then the skeletal remains of Royce Freeman, who they signed on Wednesday.
Oh wow!
As a fallback here. So you think about that, and they've got other injuries too. That this is a game where the Vikings could easily have a laugher. They're favored by 7, and I think they're going to cover Monday night in front of a national audience. And that'll be the other thing too. It'll be another national audience to see just how woebegone the Bears franchise is and how far they have to go to be competitive.
Now, Lavelle, everything you said should make Vikings fans kind of maniacally laugh with delight, but you know how us Vikings fans are. All of those names of has-beens and never will-be's, that strikes the fear in us that we talked about in segment 1, but we have no fear talking to you. This was fun again. Thanks again on short notice. Happy holidays to you. Let's do it again in the new year.
Happy holidays to you as well, and I look forward to talking to you in the new year.
Thanks, Lavelle.
Absolutely. That is Lavelle E. Neal III. I love the conversations we get with him. Hopefully Monday night is the night Chicago dies at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings. Stick around. We'll be right back. Love that song. The only part of it I don't agree with is the I don't care too much for money. I do. Judge me accordingly. This show is money. I love it every week. 2 hours with you, 10 a.m. to noon. We are the Northland Sports Page. Speaking of money, we are nothing without the financial contributions of our great sponsors.
Absolutely. Let's start with the Blackwoods Group, including their locations in Proctor and in Two Harbors. Their locations on London Road and up by the schools on Tavern on the Hill. Mount Royal Bottle Shop. Kraus Heating and Cooling, your Carrier HVAC authorized dealer. Assisted Living Locators. You can reach them at www.assistedlivinglocators.org/Duluth. Mike Regan at Christensen Group Insurance. Kohler Hyundai. Kohler Toyota. Advantage Emblem and Screen Printing. Comfort Systems of Duluth. Stewart's Bike Sports and Trophies. ABS Auto Solutions. Hoops Brewing. And Arola Architecture Studio.
So again, we want you to buy everything that those folks are selling, and we're going to play buy or sell right now to close out hour number 1. Hour number 2 will have guests galore. But again, calling Dave Hoops a guest, again, feels like a misnomer.
No, I agree with that. But he's still calling in, so
yes.
we have to figure out a way to categorize. So we'll categorize him as a guest.
So the sports brewer, Dave Hoops, he will kick off hour number 2. And then CJ Osuchukwu, one of our greatest friends in the coaching world and one of the best when it comes to girls basketball.
Yeah, and not just best coach, but best advocate, right? We talked to him about girls basketball, and, man, CJ's got his finger on the pulse.
And then there are a lot of folks who are waiting to see if they're closing the show, they being us, closing the show the same way we always do. Yes. We're going to draw some lines with Vince Glenn today.
And there's going to be some interesting conversations. I really do want to talk to him about the retirement on the field of Devondre Campbell and on Monday night where he refused to go into the football game because that's got to rub Vincey in 100 different wrong ways.
Fair enough. So hopefully buy or sell will rub you the right way, because here's how we're going to play it. I'm going to give a statement for each of the 4 major sports leagues: NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB.
Sounds good.
If you agree with those statements, you are going to say buy, and you're going to tell me why. If you disagree, you're going to say sell, and you're going to tell me why. Your additional, task, in addition to your why, is the order in which we play.
I've got a head cold today, Brian. I got to make sure I get this right, or you'll make fun of me.
No, I wouldn't do that.
So we're going to start with Major League Baseball.
All right, Major League Baseball. We just had a great conversation with Lavelle E, Neal III about baseball in general. The Twins kind of in a buy or sell mode, of course. Juan Soto in a lap of luxury financially that none of us will ever be familiar with.
$1 billion? Can you imagine what Lavelle said?
No, I can't. That's the thing.
A future $1 billion contract. Wow.
So I just want to know your opinion on this, because it's going to feel a little bit like old man yells at cloud. But I just want to know your opinion on this. Buy or sell that a contract like Juan Soto is ruining baseball?
Well, because so few guys get that, I'm going to sell. Lavelle brought up the fact that high tide raises all boats. I get it. But at some point, when you're Steve Cohen and you're worth $20 billion, are you going to throw one of those $20 billion to one guy? Man, that's tough. I don't think it's ruining it if you get, a 27-year-old in the middle of his prime hitter that people compare to Ted Williams for the highest amount of money ever. I don't think that ruins it. The question is going to be, he brought up Vlad Guerrero. Now, Vlad Guerrero hits $500 million, hitting $290 with 29
This is like
home runs.
when Kirk Cousins was the highest paid quarterback, and then the better quarterbacks, they had their turn, and where do you go?
Pete Alonso, who's been at best average until the lights are bright.
He's slowly turning into Steve Balboni.
100%. But are we going to talk $250 million for him over 5 years or over 3 years? Excuse me. Well, now we're getting into that. I don't know if he deserves that money.
All right, so I'm going to sell tentatively that it's ruining baseball as well, because Lavelle E. Neal III kind of did do the turn back the clock angle of it. We've all talked about this when A-Rod got the 252. Let's not forget Kirby was the first to get $3 million a year. Remember, it was 9 over 3 back then, and we thought, what in the world are we doing?
I read an article in The Athletic that compared doing all the, a dollar is worth now versus what it was worth when A-Rod signed that contract. A-Rod's contract is still bigger.
But here's the reason that I tentatively sell, because I do think it has an opportunity to ruin baseball, and you kind of alluded to how, because there are better players, not a ton, but there are better players than Juan Soto, and their turn is going to come, and that contract is going to be even larger, in my opinion.
Older.
But how far down does the pricing go? Because I just said the Twins played an awful September, and I don't know the reason, and I don't care, but the cost to go to opening day at Target Field this coming season, for me, with the same seats, is higher than it was a year ago. Yeah. So if contracts continue to go up, doesn't everything else? And I'm not getting political and talking about inflation, but are you going to price the ultimate family game out of families where it's harder to attend a game? And then it's going to be ruined because you're not going to have butts in seats. And we've already talked about how difficult the TV deals are.
Well, not just that, but then your kids don't get to go.
That's what I mean.
And that's
what I mean.
It's not just butts.
It's a family game where the family can't go.
Yeah, and they're going to throw their future away. No, I agree with you. I think it changes when they get the bigger TV contracts back. But the prices of seats are never coming down. That's just not going to happen.
But what happened to the idea of this sport doesn't appeal to kids, so we're speeding it up and we're making it more hip, and we're putting it on Apple TV, which, by the way, does a phenomenal broadcast, but it's very much targeting a different market than it did when you and I were young. I'm just afraid that if you don't have the next generation, the generation after that, and the generation after that interested in your sport because they can't afford to see it, you're in big trouble.
I agree. At what point do they take the PED restriction off? Just to remember, it was really tough sledding for Major League Baseball until the 98 chased a home run record. I mean, do they say we're not going to test so hard anymore?
If you're new to this show, you're getting a good taste of it because it is December 14th, and it could be baseball season the way we've talked for the last 20 minutes. 1 down, 3 to go.
We should
go
probably move on.
We should.
Let's go to the National Basketball Association.
All right, so I said something today about 10 minutes before the show started that I'm curious of your overall opinion on. We already know that Anthony Edwards is the best player on the Minnesota Timberwolves roster. There are a lot of proverbial straws that stir the drink for this team, though. And I said, I feel like this team is going to go where Rudy Gobert goes. When he's good, they're good. Buy or sell, you feel that's true?
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's quite that cut and dried. I think there's a couple players that you can put there too, and one of them is Jaden. I think that when Jaden's engaged, he erases players that are problematic on the perimeter. And so if he's playing, if somebody like Klay Thompson, right? Jaden can take Klay Thompson out of his game. So if you're waiting for the 3-point guy, Jaden's key. But how about this? Mike Conley might be the next most important player on that team because he's the guy that gets everything put into place, and they don't have a replacement for him.
Right.
You know, the Timberwolves could survive a few games with Nas at center and Garza scoring 12 points and getting 6 rebounds, in limited
in
minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah.
But they've proven they don't have anybody. Dillingham is still raw and short. They don't really have anybody to take Conley's spot.
So I have to buy it because I said it, so this will keep us on schedule quickly. I do think that Rudy is the barometer of this team because when he's just in the middle and too slow to react, or you're getting him the ball in weird spots, things go awry. He is the reigning defensive player of the year.
Yeah.
But when you get him dancing like a wounded deer on the perimeter and not able to keep up with someone, it's a problem. When he's a rim protector, that's what he's great at. And you look at the games that they've been successful, and it's usually Rudy dominated this, whether it was a stat or just altering shots, or if it was 15-11 like he's wanting to do.
That's what I was going to say. When Rudy is 15-11, yeah, he's that guy. When he's 9-12, he's just difficult.
But that feeds my point. I think too often when he's 9-12, they lose, and you can point to that as to why.
All right, I'll go there. Let's go to the National Hockey League.
All right, so this one should be relatively simple, but I'm curious because a few months ago it certainly wasn't. You and I sat doing a show at Hoops Brewing in August talking about whether or not the Gus bus should be traded. We all went, yeah, just move along. Well, I'll tell you what, the cornerstone to this great start pretty much has been him. Buy or sell that the Gus bus's future is right here.
Sell. And I'm going to sell that because goaltending is fickle. Like, they really should have sold him in the summer. And now with the income coming, well, maybe with the increase in funding, they can afford that. But you look at those long contracts for goaltenders; they never seem to work out. You know, the guy in Winnipeg, notwithstanding, long-term goaltender contracts, they're so up and down. One year they're great, the next year they're
Is it
not.
weird that the guy in Winnipeg, his name is Hellebuck, because it's been a hell of money spent by the Jets
and great money spent,
Yeah.
right? But so many goaltenders are just flaky, and Gus has proven he's kind of that guy too. He came into last year out of shape. Who hears of a hockey player that comes in out of shape after a good season? That's just weird. No, I don't think his future is there. Although the money increase next year that the Wild can expect maybe changes that a little.
And that last point you made is why I'm going to buy just barely. I'll buy tentatively again. And it's a little bit, this is going to be a weird analogy, but I think you'll understand it. I look at Gus Bus kind of the way I look at Sam Darnold. That you're supposed to be here because the flower is going to be done, and we know that. And then the young kid's not ready yet.
Yeah, no doubt. He's been bad in Iowa.
Right. So it's a weird kind of bridge goalie, but your bridge goalie's been phenomenal, and all of a sudden it's a hot topic. I do think that because the kid's been bad and because he's a kid and we know that the flower's leaving, that Gus has a future here. Now, he talked about the long-term nature of the contract. How long? I don't think it's going to be some sort of 8-year deal, but I think Gus Bus is going to be here a little while longer than people thought.
But if you even throw a 5-year deal at him, all of a sudden Wallstead is, 29.
Yeah, I was going to say he's 30 and hasn't played.
Yeah, so I just don't, because of the flaky nature of goaltending, and Gus has already proved he is a flaky goaltender. I don't know how you do that.
All right, we've only left a couple minutes for the National Football League, but I cheated a little bit because this is a former National Football League character, if you will, who is now going to take a shot at the college ranks. Buy or sell that Bill Belichick is going to fit in well coaching college football in Chapel Hill, which they've now dubbed Chapel Bill, by the way, University of North Carolina.
This is such a weird thing because if he could hire PJ to be his recruiter, right? He'll be great. But if he's got to do any kind of recruiting, that is not Bill Belichick. He is not going to go into mom and dad's house.
Right.
That's just not going to be. And so it'll be no different than
So
Mac
you're
Brown.
selling that he's going to fit in at all.
No, if they can find somebody who brings in those players, he could be great because all the structure, all the leadership from on top, all that's going to play. And he says, I can teach a kid to be an NFL football player. We are going to be professional. I mean, all the stuff he's said. If he can get talent there, yeah, he has a shot. But I mean, who's going to text or tweet or Instagram or whatever future players? It ain't going to be Bill. He's not doing it. He's not going to do any PJ stuff. And PJ is recruiting very well into a team that had no business when he started. North Carolina's got a lot of really good players around, but they need to get somebody in the high schools, and I can't imagine Bill Belichick sitting in a high school AD's office.
Right. I'm going to sell that this works because I just think of the way Bill Belichick and his tenure in New England ended. The roster got younger and younger, and he was out of touch communicating with that group. Well, you go to college, and you're getting younger by default. Now, there is an angle to it of, hey, college football and college sports with NIL money is becoming like coaching pro athletes. No question, Bill Belichick was very good at that. I just think this is old man trying to be hip, and it's just not going to fly.
I think his coaching style, if he can get the right people around him, is going to work because he can tell somebody.
He's going to be like a president that needs a good cabinet. He's going to have great coordinators.
And Debo's like that, and we've said for 3 years now, PJ has to be more like that. But Bill can teach a kid how to become a pro, no question. But the question is how are you going to get a 17-year-old into North Carolina when that's what he's going to?
I'll be interested to see if he softens at all because the message had to be sent that the way he doesn't work anymore. But again, he built his resume on who he is. So is he going to be different or not? I just think if he's not different, it's going to fail, but we'll see.
No, I agree with you.
Now I want to know because the Gophers opened with North Carolina, devastating loss, but Brad Johnson's kid was the QB and got hurt. Are we going to be looking at Brad Johnson's kid being coached by Bill Belichick next season?
Yeah, and that might work because Brad will say, hey, he can get you in the NFL.
This is how we do things.
Those are the guys he's going to have to get because he's not going to get one of those NIL wide receivers who wants more, or the kid from Florida that I sent that meme to you who asked for $45 million and guaranteed starting. That kid's never going to play for Bill Belichick.
So if this doesn't work, the Tar Heels will say bye, bye, bye to Bill Belichick in a hurry. That's buy or sell. Hour one is done. Dave Hoops is next. Stick around. We'll be right back.